Okay, brought my parts washer out here, and I've got the rocker arms, push rods cleaned up to go back on there, and all except for this one. This is the one that the top of this push rod is kind of boogered up a little bit, so we're going to replace the push rod and the rocker arm. Got new ones to go in there. Got the intake cleaned up, the bottom intake. So I'm going to get started here. I'm going to put the rocker arms, push rods on first. Make sure everything's good, so we'll be... Okay, get the rags I got over here off, and alright. First push rod in here. Then we'll take a new one and put in right here. This is where we had the messed up. Blew these off with air, but they didn't get quite all the washing fluid off. What we're going to do is put a little engine assembly lube on the pivot, stick it down in here, a little of where the push rod goes, a little bit of where it goes on the valve, and then inward, about one thing, put a little bit on the bolt too. Have everything well lubricated. Alright, this is the new rocker arm and pivot. What we'll do is put a little assembly lube on it, drop it down in the hole, a little bit there, and a little bit there. Set it down there. Get my bolt. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of these put in. I'll be back with you shortly. Okay, got all the push rods in, got the rocker arms on, got them torqued down to, we'll start out just hand tightened, and I've turned the motor over 2 times to make sure everything lined up. And then I torqued the rocker arms to 23 foot-pounds. Next thing, get the intake on, so we'll be back with you shortly. Okay, we got the lower intake finally torqued down. Took about 4 trips around this thing to get all those bolts torqued. Cause you start out in the middle and you tighten one down, tighten another one down, keep on torquing beside of them. The first one you started with is loose, so you have to keep going back over them to get them torqued down. This car was showing check engine light, and 2 different readers said that it was the camshaft position sensor was making the light come on. That's this little doohickey right here, and I've ordered a new one. I'm going to replace it, get the water pump back on her, get the rocker valve covers back on. Okay, this is the long bolt that goes into the water jacket on the water pump, and I had a small leak there. That's the reason I pulled the water pump off, and by looking at the threads on this bolt, the Permatex I put in there didn't seal it up, so we're going to use a different sealer on it when we put it back in. We'll be back with you shortly. Okay, this is the way the hole for the heater pipe looks in the water pump, and we don't want to put it back together looking like that, so I'm going to take some Scotch-Brite and I'll be back with you shortly. Okay, that's what the hole looks like after a little bit of Scotch-Brite. I cleaned up, got it good and smooth, so that O-ring will seal good in there. Be back with you shortly. Okay, I've got everything cleaned up and got both sides of the gasket coated with a thin film RTV and letting it dry up just a little bit before I stick a pump on it. We'll be back with you shortly. Okay, got all the bolts in it except for the one that goes into the water jacket. The long bolt on the bottom over here. And I'm getting ready to put it in. I'm putting the thread sealing on it and giving it a good coating. Up above the threads I put a little anti-seize on it so as to hopefully keep it from rusting. When you got dissimilar metals, meaning aluminum and steel, then that's an open invitation for rusting. Okay, get these things torqued up. I'll be back with you shortly. Sticky point with a whole lot of people, but put a new O-ring on the end of the pipe here. I'm going to anti-seize it real good, and I'm going to anti-seize the hole. And get her lined up here. that's all there is to it. If you replace the water pump, about the only thing you can do is take a torch and heat that boss up on that water pump hot enough to melt that O-ring to get that pipe out. Once you get it out, clean it up and anti-seize it. And, like I say, it's been a couple of years since I put a pump on it, and that pipe slid right on out because it had the anti-seize on it. We'll be back with you shortly. Okay, to replace valve cover gaskets on this 3.8, you got to pull it off here and lay that over there out the way. Then you got to push out these little ferrules. They got an O-ring on top of them. But that's how you get them out. I'm going to get it cleaned up and then we'll go through putting it back together. Be back with you shortly. Okay, got the valve covers cleaned up. Got the new gasket laying on there. Take these ferrules, put some O-ring on it. And come up through the hole and work these little tabs on the gasket over the end of the ferrule so that it holds it in. And I'm putting them in with the bevel side down. Hopefully that'll give a little more room to play with down in the hole. Well, this is going to be a son of a gun. Well, you can feel them snap in. Of course, the last one wanted to be a son of a gun. There we go. Now, make sure the gasket is down in the grooves good all the way. There we go, ready to put back on. Okay, I was a little early sticking that water pipe in there because it looks like it's got to go over top of the fuel rail, so I've got to get the wiring figured out. Get the fuel rail back in there with the injectors and then we'll be back with you. Okay, I'm changing out the O-rings on the injectors. What we do, we got this little plastic keeper on them here. We'll take a pair of side cutters and get in there, kind of gently work that thing off. It's just a piece of plastic. way so they'll catch it when it snaps off. We'll pull the O-rings off. And wipe down the end of the injector. Then we get our new O-rings. Just slide it on. We'll snap these keepers back on. And we're almost ready to put it back in. I'm going to grease those O-rings with some engine assembly lube before I put them back in so that they'll go in a little easier. And make sure the holes got a little bit of lubricant in them too. We'll be back with you shortly. Okay, got it in there finally. Had to pull the injectors back out, get that pipe back over in there, and then get the wiring routed in between the fuel rail. It just, everything wrapped around one another and it all has to go together at one time. Okay, as it turns out, the main wiring harness goes under the fuel rail at the back and runs along the side and up and under on the driver's side. Then on the passenger side it comes out over top of the fuel rail. This heater hose, or heater pipe, goes under the fuel rail at the back and over top of the fuel rail at the front. So it all has to kind of go in there together, and that was the part I was missing out on. Because I forgot how I took it apart. And anyhow, that's what we got now. We're just down to getting the rest of it back together. Okay, got a new set of spark plugs in it to replace these old junky things. And a new set of spark plug wires put on. Getting ready to put the front of the motor back on now. Got most all of the plumbing hooked up. We'll be back with you shortly. In order to put the belt tensioner bracket on, and well, it also holds air conditioning, but to get the one bolt up under there, you have to pull a plug off of the cam position sensor. And just don't forget to put it back on. And it's 2 bolts, 1 stud. Use 15mm socket, and 1 bolt uses 13mm. Alright, go ahead and put the air conditioner back on the bracket. Get the other side put on. Be back with you shortly. Well, I've got the majority of it put back together. It about run out of time and patience and giddy up go for today, so I think I'm going to call it quits. I've still got to put a radiator in it. The radiator is stopped up. It wouldn't drain when I tried to drain it. Anyhow, we'll be back with you